Well, and this brings up a really interesting thing here, too, because we've spoken about this on the show before, about the way class drives American politics in ways that people don't often want to talk about. And one of the things we're seeing right now is this big surge in migration, and a lot of Republicans attack the Democrats for this, but they're also about basically, bringing in lots of migrants. This idea that Trump is protecting Americans, that must be driving people on both sides of the aisle absolutely nuts.
Trump is 10 points ahead of Biden in the latest poll, ABC poll, okay? So we're not talking about some Republican outfit. People were saying that had to do with the indictments. It doesn't. It is 100% the result of American cities teeming with illegal migrants and their families and their children who are now in public schools that are already overburdened, who are now in hotels where you have public housing for poor Americans that's falling apart. It is unfair. I was talking to an immigrant from 30 years ago today. He said, I've been paying taxes for 30 years. They just show up and they're handed so much. People are so upset about this, and it really is turning the tide in Trump's favor. And the thing is you're absolutely right. Democrats like to talk about immigration in moral terms, as if they are somehow the beneficent, the sanctuary for bring us, you're tired, you're hungry, people fleeing persecution. The vast majority, and I'm talking 95% of the migrants who have come over the last 3 years during Joe Biden's reign are economic migrants, and they are coming here to compete with American working class people for their jobs. And that is why this is 100% about economics. And the funny thing is that the Democrats know that. They want these workers. They want them in their cities working for less than minimum wage, doing cheap jobs, cheap labor in their households, and competing for working class jobs because they don't want to pay the working class what they get paid.
And yet, Batya, what's really fascinating to me, though, is that where the Democrats really have their big strongholds in the cities, it's an absolute, well, as Trump would say, a total disaster. Because, you see now Target, which is, of course, a store that appeals to middle-class and working-class Americans. They're closing shops around the country because of crime waves we've seen. Well, have a look at this footage from Philadelphia just the other day. Again, this stuff happens and it affects working class people and middle class people much more than the rich who can live in gated communities and things like that. This Democrat model is just not working, is it?
Yeah, they've completely given up on the idea of the rule of law. They don't believe in having a national border. They don't believe in, law and order. They don't believe that criminals should go to prison. I've never met, a progressive who didn't have more sympathy for a criminal than they did for his victim. I mean, it's really, really appalling. And it's because they've given up on the idea of America itself. They don't feel proud to be American. They don't think there's anything worth protecting here in this country. The other day, there was a clip from Louis C.K. that went viral where he was saying, why should Americans have it better than everybody else? Get rid of the border, bring people in here. They'll make it worse for us. That's good for us. I mean, that is really what they think. And that stems from enormous, enormous privilege. You only come up with these cockamamie views that law and order doesn't matter and that criminals deserve more sympathy than their victims when you yourself are protected from the impact of crime and protected from the impact of mass immigration because your jobs are not being threatened, your children are not being threatened, and your homes are not being threatened.
And Batya, like this whole idea that everything they touch, they just make worse. I was fascinated. I thought this was a really telling story when, and I want to ask you about this because you're a snappy, fashionable dresser. Chuck Schumer said they were going to suspend the rules and allow John Fetterman to come in dressed, like some overgrown Bart Simpson character in a hoodie and shorts to vote. Well, now the Senate has finally, and I say some good news here, passed a bipartisan resolution to say, no, we're going to keep a formal dress code in the upper chamber. Batya, what are your thoughts on this whole Fetterman weirdness, this debacle? And what does it say about Democrats that they think that they can put up a clown like this and say, hey, he's your guy?
It's funny, when he was on the campaign trail, I think the fact that he sort of dressed down and looked like a working class person, he didn't look like a Washington insider, that really worked in his favor. But there's something so patronizing about wearing that sweatshirt once you become a representative of the people, right? I mean, a working class person who was invited into the halls of Congress would wear a suit. I mean, you have to have, again, enormous privilege. You have to have gone to Harvard to think that it's appropriate to wear a hoodie in the Senate, where you are representing the American people, where you are representing the American government, where you are representing the American nation, right? So I really see it as this kind of duplicity. And I think that he has that in a number of ways. I mean, of course, I feel so sorry for him for what he's been through, but he's the classic example of a cry bully, right? When he wants to make fun of somebody, he's totally brutal. I mean, you should see the way that he tweets at people. He's extremely mean. But when anybody makes fun of the way he dresses, he immediately gets, tears well up in his eyes, and he's so hurt. And how could you possibly, right? And I mean, I think there's something about the progressive mindset that's really captured by that cry bully mentality.
Absolutely, cry bullies. I couldn't put it better myself.